In this penultimate week, we focus on crisis management, and within this short recording, I want to first define crisis and its relationship to risk. And then I also want to overview some of the basics of how organizations go about managing a crisis. I'm going to start by offering some examples of crisis, and it makes sense to place this in an organizational context. So an organizational crisis is anything which could threaten a major product line or business unit, damage an organization's financial performance, harm the health and well-being of consumers, employees, surrounding communities or the environment, and destroy the public's trust in an organization, its reputation and image. Last week we talked about risk, which is represented here as a situation involving the possibility of a negative outcome. On the other hand, a crisis is an unstable or crucial time or state of affairs in which a decisive change is impending, especially one with the distinct possibility of a highly undesirable outcome. So a crisis is an active situation, whereas a risk is only a possible situation. And like we discussed last week, it's impossible to completely remove risk from organizations from just conducting business. But there are some risk scenarios that are extremely unlikely, but their negative outcome is very severe. And you guessed it, I'm talking about a global pandemic. And organizations across all sectors and industries were impacted negatively by COVID-19. It required immediate and decisive organizational action in most instances to, as the graphics suggest, keep heads above water. And an organizational response to a crisis is termed crisis management, which by definition is the management of an incident, accident or crisis in an effort to better inform the public, manage the response of the media and reduce or manage the impact on the organization. And building off one of the earlier slides in this recording, good crisis management is essential because poorly managing an incident or crisis results in severe repercussions for the organisation, such as poor community image, increased chances of litigation, loss of public confidence in the organisation's services, loss of visitation and business, loss of political confidence and support, and a mistrust of the organisation by the media. Some of the further guidelines around responding to crises include the need for speed. Okay, so and as Nichols and colleagues suggest, the public usually forms its perception of a crisis situation within the first 24 hours of the crisis. However, you'll notice that that statement is from 2002, and the prevalence of social media has arguably shortened that 24-hour window significantly. I'm sure you've all seen documentaries or read articles about how social media has the capability of spreading information and disinformation rapidly. Social media also has no geographic borders, which also intensifies that spread. So crisis management can be understood in terms of a process, and the one here is offered by Pedersen and colleagues. And to begin with, public relations professionals should conduct research within the organisation. The organisation's philosophy for managing the crisis and the makeup of a crisis team should be determined through consultations at all levels of management. The crisis team is instrumental in managing any crisis situation, and its assessment efforts should include predicting and analysing crisis situations that could arise. To guide personnel during the crisis, the organisation should establish a clear chain of command that specifies roles for leaders and others. And procedures should also be outlined for notifying the crisis team when a crisis occurs. Staff should make any necessary modifications in standard operating procedure to control for any issues or risks that might occur. In the integrated risk management reading on crisis management, the authors discuss the process of managing risk through mostly the duties and responsibilities of the Public Information Officer, or PIO. And as a required reading for this module, I'd encourage you to take some time to digest the information within the crisis management chapter. The contents will likely be useful when working through both assignments this week that delve into COVID-19 crisis responses. And I end here with an image of a man who has been at the forefront of a lot of the US government's crisis response to the COVID-19 pandemic. He's arguably been the public information officer for the nation over the last 14 or 15 months. And if you have any questions about crisis management, then I'll try my best to answer them, perhaps not as calmly or collectively as, say, Dr. Fauci would. But I am here should you wish to talk through any of the content or assignments in this module. Bye for now.